technology in my mind isn't good or bad. Technology just is. And then there's the question about, all right, is it put to use for good or bad? So AI, blockchain, social media, all of these things, the web, all these things can be used for amazing benefit. And at the same time, they can be used for some really nefarious things.
Robbie Bach is best known for founding and leading the team that created the Xbox. Today, he's an entertaining storyteller and catalyzing voice who writes books and speaks to audiences on leadership, creativity, strategy, and civic issues. He joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about his life and latest book, The Blockchain Syndicate. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Robbie.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our little chat.
I'm looking forward to it too. So much ground to cover, I'm sure. But we'll start from the beginning, which is, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, the first time I learned to write in the 10th grade, and I had two teachers, a civics teacher and an English teacher, who did a combined project for the year, and we had to write a 15-page thesis paper, which at that time seemed like, this massive thing. And through that process, I learned how to write. And it was more sort of like thesis writing, but I learned the grammar, the composition, all those kinds of things. And then literally, I left that world I went through college, but after college, I left that world for 20 plus years. And then when I left Microsoft, I came back and wrote a nonfiction strategy book based on my time at Microsoft, and just rediscovered the joy of just writing. And after I did that, I decided to switch to fiction, and hence came Tamika Smith and the Wilkes Insurrection, and now the Blockchain Syndicate.
It's interesting, just going back to 10th grade, we learn to write when we're really young. And we learn the rules of it, but I don't think many of us really pay attention to it, because it's not like enjoyable writing, when you're doing your sentence trees and stuff like that. And I really only understood, this is so strange, but I really only understood like grammar once I studied another language. Like once I studied French in high school, that's when it like started to click more for me, because you had to actually learn, when you're learning another language, you're actually learning kind of as an older person, but you're learning like all the basics. And that taught me like to learn the basics of English again. And around that same time, I had this great English teacher, Mr. Chris, who, really drilled in us the 5-paragraph essay format, and,
yes.
your three supporting paragraphs and your conclusion. And man, that carried me through, like being able to do that. Like once I went to college, I studied psychology, and there was a lot of writing in that. Like it was such a great foundation. But that, just going back to that 5-paragraph essay format, it's like,
it's so funny you say that, because it is the same format I learned. It was Layla Punger, my English teacher, and John Hartness, my civics teacher. And they taught us introductory paragraph, close with a thesis statement, 3 paragraphs of supporting points, wrap it up with a conclusion, and be done. And it's amazing how that works.
It's amazing how it works, but also how it just carries you through life. Like,
totally.
But I remember actually my first job was in advertising, and, they had to teach me how to write for business. And that was something new, because they didn't want long paragraphs. They wanted like bullets, just get to the point. So I had to unlearn and relearn. So that's,
Well, and I've sort of gone through both things, right? I went to business school, and I went to work for Microsoft for 22 years. And so you're right. You learn the bullet point, get to the point. PowerPoint slides are better than long Word documents. And so you learn all those things. But now I have this really nice blend. If I want to do an extemporaneous talk, I go back to quick introduction, 3 main points, quick conclusion. And I know how to do that. And I use that some if I'm writing, like I'm writing these letters on LinkedIn about what's going on in the country. And I use that style in those letters. When I'm writing Tamika Smith, it's not like that at all. And when I'm writing my fiction novels, it's completely different. And then it's just creative writing, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, because, when you're writing dialogue, people don't talk like we write, like we write grammar, we write, long form stuff. You have
Totally.
to unlearn that, because people don't talk in eloquent sentences. They talk in grunts and sometimes motion. Sometimes they don't even talk. So you have to learn how to deal with that.
Well, I have one character in the book, Bryce Roskovich, who is a sort of he's a works in the basement white hat hacker. So I mean, he's a technical guy with maybe not so much personality, and I have to write him as a character and have him talking even though he doesn't talk. Right? I mean, there's nobody for him to talk to. So you're writing dialogue for somebody who doesn't speak, and that is super interesting and fun to kind of explore.
When did you start getting the sort of the itch to write fiction?
Well, so my first book was a book called Xbox Revisited, which is a civic strategy book. It's designed for nonprofit organizations, government organizations, about how to create strategy in a crisp way, which was wonderful. It got my writing itch going. And I got to the end of that. I did a little bit of marketing. I now still do a bunch of public speaking based on that book. And then I said, well, gosh, I really love this writing thing. What am I going to do? So do I have another nonfiction book in me? And the answer is probably yes. And then I thought about doing that, and I was like, oh my God, that would be so boring to do. I just don't want to do that again. And so I literally sat down and said, okay, I'm writing fiction. And I wrote 100 pages of character sketches on the day in the life of 5 characters. No plot, no storyline, not even a genre, just these 5 characters and what they were doing on a day and how their lives would interact. And from that came the Wilkes Insurrection. Suddenly I discovered I was writing a thriller, and pretty soon I discovered that, okay, this plot thing is actually kind of important. You might want to think about that. And then I'm writing dialogue, and it's not sounding very good, so I got to work on that. And then the whole scene description, point of view. I mean, there's all these things that come into writing fiction, and I just learned it as I went along. And, I had some really good editors, and people gave me a lot of great feedback. And, Wilkes Insurrection's I'm really proud of that book. It's a good book.
Yeah. It's like when you're thinking about all those things that you have to think about when you're writing, it's helpful not to know them when you're actually writing for the first time, because it's like trying to perfect a golf swing. There's so many things you got to keep in mind. And if you have all that stuff in your mind when you're trying to hit the ball, it's not going to go straight. Like it's going to go like every which way probably. And if you're trying to write thinking, oh, I have character voice, I got this and I've got that. And, you just got to do it. And then you have to go back. My point of view, anyway, you got to do it. Then you got to go back to it. Then you learn so much from that first book. It's a great teacher.
Well, and what I do now in my writing, I will come in if I have a writing day, which, is only maybe 30% of my time. But if I have a writing day, the first thing I'll do is reread what I wrote the last time, and I will edit it for all the things that you just discussed. And then I will write for the rest of the time, and I won't edit it there. I'll come back the next time and edit it. And I will go through 3 full edits of a manuscript before I send it to a publisher. And in each of those edits, I'm focusing on, all right, in this one, I'm focusing on scene description. In this one, I'm fixing point of view, which I just naturally mess up. This one, I'm going to focus on my male character descriptions because I'm better at defining and writing female characters than I am male characters. So whatever it is, you go through all those edits, and then you say, okay, now I'm ready to have a professional actually edit it. It's really fun. I enjoyed that process.
Well, it sounds like though you start with the work and then you end with the fun, right? So you start with the work of editing, and then it's the fun of writing and creation, and then
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's a good way to do it. It's pretty similar to how I do it too. Where I like to, sometimes I'm tempted just to write the story and get it out of me before I edit, but I always do find myself going back and just smoothing over. And of course, as you're building characters and you're doing character development, hopefully your primary protagonist is different on page 300 than they are on page 1. But you also have to fix things that you've learned about that character.
Correct.
Over the time of writing them. So you have to go back and, oh yeah, that's right. I mentioned that they had this background and I have to include that somewhere. And it's like putting a puzzle together.
Well, it totally is. And I find that the thing I find about editing what I wrote the last time isn't even so much that the editing is important. Yes, it makes the text better. So good. There's improvement. The bigger thing is it gets me into the mode. I think really that's how I avoid, writer's block, because it gets me back in the mode of writing and thinking. I'm back in the character's head. I've got the plot in my mind now, and I'm going, and it creates momentum for the rest of what I do that day. And I find that to be super valuable. And since I don't write with an outline, that momentum is really important. I have to have the momentum to do what's coming next.
More of a pantser then.
I am a pantser, and the way I've learned it works for me is when I start the next chapter in Tamika Smith's life, I will write a prologue that I think is going to take place 3/4 of the way through the book.
Interesting.
And I write that first. And then the rest of the story is about getting to the prologue. And how do I get to that really exciting, important scene that I think is dramatic and meaningful to the plot? And then I take my character arcs and say, all right, these character arcs, they have to map to that prologue. So in the Blockchain Syndicate, the first scene is this isn't giving anything away. It's the first part of the book. The prologue is a guy sneaking a body and putting it on display in a state rotunda in the state legislature. And, you wonder who it is, why it's there, why he's sneaking in, all the theatrics around that. And the next 270 pages are about getting to that point. Interesting.
So, I mean, that's a natural segue into the Blockchain Syndicate. What else can you share with us about the story?
Well, I think the easiest way to describe this is it's sort of old school espionage and new school cybercrime and how they blend together. Think of it as, in the old world, you would have thought of there being a mafia boss and a mafia family creating a syndicate to pursue whatever they're pursuing. In this new cybercrime world, there's a boss, there's a syndicate, and nobody knows who's in it, and nobody knows who's leading it. Because blockchain obfuscates all of the identities. And so you have a guy named Lee Bowen who has created this syndicate to perpetrate really bad things on the country. And there's other people in the syndicate. They don't know who's leading it, and nobody knows who the other members of the family are. And that creates a set of tensions and dynamics that feed through the entire story.
It's tensions and dynamics, but just going back to old school mafia stuff, nobody can squeal.
Exactly. Well, no, that's the perfect part. The perfect part is nobody can squeal, and and it also sets up this tension of the hunt. So the FBI is trying to figure it out. They've got, this guy, Bryce Roskovich, who I mentioned, who is a white hat hacker. So he's doing everything he can to figure out what's going on. And so he's got his, you've got old school police work and new school cyber work trying to resolve this problem. And then you have Tamika Smith, my protagonist, who is the target of all this activity. And you mix those things together and you get some really interesting dynamics playing out.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be an Xbox game. I mean, if
well, people ask me, did you always know you were a creative writer? And the answer is no. I always knew I loved writing, but I think it was my 10 years on Xbox that enabled me to sort of understand the creative process and to feel that in myself. And, I'm not writing video games, obviously, but they are a creative endeavor. They have storylines, they have characters, they have plots, they have scenes, there's visual description. It's all the same things that's in a book. And, I love doing it.
And they've got the budgets of motion pictures and sometimes greater than motion pictures.
No, that's exactly right. And so you really start to see, so much of, what happens in a video game is part of a storyline that's been written. So you literally have authors, you have artists, you have producers, you have all the things you'd have in a movie. They're just functioning in a different way.
Yeah. And, I come from, the Atari generations. 2600 here, right? So you no real storylines when you're playing Missile Command, or maybe there's a little storyline with Missile Command, but
only a little. You think about the storyline in Tetris, or the storyline in Asteroids. I mean, there isn't really a storyline, but then you go to Master Chief and Halo, and there's a series of books that tell the Halo story. I mean, it's a real world.
And you get lost in it. I like Xbox, PlayStation, too many buttons for me. Again, Atari generation, right? My son though had an Xbox, or has an Xbox. He's 23 now. I don't know where it is. It's probably in his bedroom somewhere. He lives in Manhattan now. But we got this the Star Wars game, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, then now this I could rally around this. I could just watch him play it and be entertained. And that's why esports is like huge. I mean, I make fun of it, but it is. I mean, it's big business.
Yeah, what I love about video games, and this carries over into my writing and my books, is its blending of sort of Hollywood and Silicon Valley in the same sort of genre. And in my books, it's maybe a little bit more, instead of Hollywood, it's a little bit more Washington, D.C., but it's a little bit more the blending of what's going on in our country and the technology that's enabling some of these things to happen. And so you get a combination of my technical background, my civics background, and some creative writing. And, I think you get something that's really, really cool to read.
Yeah. And it's, it is scary when you think about it, though. It's like, I remember just as a kid, I saw, I had an IBM PCXT, right? Big box, 2 5 1/4 floppies, no hard drive. And I saw this commercial for something called CompuServe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get on this. I don't have a modem in the computer though, so I go to like Newmark and Lewis and I buy a 2400 baud modem, throw it in there, get on Prodigy because that's the free software that came with it. And then I go to school, I study psychology, but I get into advertising. I start in digital marketing, working on some of the world's first websites for Citibank and Delta Airlines. And I look at where we are now with interactive technology, and I wish I could really dial it all back sometimes, because it is so, like, just having access to these things in our pockets and what social media can do, or what you could do with social engineering through social media, it actually scares me.
Well, it's a little bit of the theme that runs through both books, which is, technology in my mind isn't good or bad. Technology just is. And then there's the question of, all right, is it put to use for good or bad? So AI, blockchain, social media, all of these things, the web, all these things can be used for amazing benefit. And at the same time, they can be used for some really nefarious things. And so, in each of the books, the theme of technology being a force in our society that gets used for both good and bad is super powerful. And my white hat hacker, Bryce Roskovich, is on both sides of that equation. He uses it for good and for bad. And it's an interesting societal dilemma for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's true with any new technology, right?
You bet.
Technology in and of itself is not good or bad, right? It doesn't have a moral compass. It's how we as humans choose to use it.
And how we as civic and society choose to regulate and manage it. And at various points in times in our history, we've think about television when I was growing up, heavily regulated. Like, you forget, but there's only four networks, three or four channels, 3 networks. What they could put on was heavily regulated and had to be approved, and there's all these things. And now we're in a world where that's changed, obviously, and probably for the better. But how government decides to manage those things is actually a key issue. Something we have to pay attention to.
Absolutely. I remember, the days, because we didn't have cable TV when I was really young. So it was, NBC, CBS,
ABC, and
maybe Channel 11 in New York, like WPIX was something, and PBS was there.
They were on the UHF frequency with a little round antenna on the back of your TV. Yeah, I'm not as old as you are, but I certainly remember those days. or I'm older than you are, and I remember those days. Who knows? I'm probably older than you are. And based on looks, I think I'm older.
Cold cream, Pond's cold cream. It's amazing what it can do. I worked on that brand for a little while, and
that's funny. That's funny.
I stand by it, Rob.
These are the kinds of things that I like to pick up in writing, because I want my thrillers. I want you to, when you finish one of my books, I want you to say, wow, I couldn't put that down. That was awesome, exciting, good plot. I love the way technology and society link together, la, la, la. And then I want you to walk back and say, I love the characters, and it made me think. And if I can, get people to fall in love with the characters and really care about them as people and think about the challenges we face in the context of a great story that they really love reading and couldn't put down, that's success.
Yeah. But they say write what you know, and it sounds to me like you're tapping into, not only your 10th grade, English and civics, but you're tapping into your time at Microsoft with the tech stuff. You're tapping into, your passion for civics, and the work you're doing there, and you can use your fiction to like really process it, but also write authentically about those topics because you are so involved in it. And that's what I think readers can sniff out whether something is inauthentic, and if it's forced or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for me, and the thing where the line I have to manage as a writer is I don't think I have a problem with authenticity, because I know the subject matter well, and if I don't, I do research on it. I think it's less about authenticity and more about making sure that the adventure of the thriller is what's the driving force in the story. It can't be theme and message first. It has to be story first, characters first. And then you pause and you say, oh, I learned something. That's kind of the way I try to think about the writing I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, because people are buying a thriller, right?
Totally.
You can't let them down, right? You can't.
No, totally. They didn't buy a civics nonfiction book. They bought a thriller, and they should get a thriller.
Right. And if you're too heavy-handed with like your own personal points of view, people can sniff that out too.
Well, this is why the characters are so important, because my Senator Tamika Smith, she starts as a major in the first book, ends up in the U.S. Senate. Senator Tamika Smith, she has her own points of view, and they're not exactly mine. And I think readers get into her mindset, and now she's the one who's has her agenda, and her agenda is whatever it is, but she has the agenda, not me. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. But what I think also, when you're writing characters who are not like you, or who you differ with their point of view, it's actually a great exercise in empathy building, because
totally
you can come to understand, hey, I can have a different point of view than somebody, and still care about them. And of course you care about them because you're writing them, right? You're putting them in books and stuff. But I do think people who read a lot and people who write, particularly fiction, are a bit more empathetic and have maybe a higher degree of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So just to pick the specific example. So Tamika Smith serves in the military. She was a military brat. She's mixed race. She's a woman. She's everything I'm not. She's the U.S. Senator. She's everything I'm not. And so for me to write from her perspective, I have to be able to put myself somehow in that space. And, I find that, and I think I enjoy writing her more than I do some of my male characters, just because the male characters, feel a little bit more like me. And I don't want that. So I have to separate them in some ways. But she's her own self, and I kind of know what she's thinking and what she's saying. And that's really powerful. And I think it does take more EQ than IQ for sure.
Yeah. I know you had a long business career, but I'm curious, pivoting to, creative writing a book. What did you think was harder, writing the book or getting that first book out,
Right.
or doing all the promotion you have to do to support it?
Well, there's difficulty and then there's joy. The joy is all in the writing and the process. I really do love that. I love the process of writing. And even the editing, while I grumble some about it, it's a puzzle for me. I'm trying to put together to improve the plot, improve the character, improve the dialogue. That to me is a giant puzzle. The marketing part of it feels a little bit more like what I did at Microsoft, which I liked. I mean, it was my professional career, but it's a little bit more. I don't get the emotional feedback from that. I can certainly do it. I spent the last hour before I got on with you wrestling with MailChimp. And so
I know that pain well.
So you can appreciate that is a very useful tool. And I've learned, how effective it can be and help me market the book, but it's not a joy. Right. I'm trying to figure out anyway, you understand how that goes.
I know. I did putting together email campaigns and sequencing and
it's just
pages and lead magnets and MailChimp as a sponsor. I'm going to make a note to myself. Now that you brought them up, we'll have to reach out.
Well, it's funny because in between the two books, I wasn't using MailChimp as much. And I will say the product's gotten better. I mean, there's a lot of things in it that are easier this second wave around in my campaigns for the second book than were there for the first book. But that's for sure.
Yeah, my issue is, as your readership grows, as your list grows, your mailing list grows, which are two great things. Also that the price of MailChimp starts to go up too. So.
Well, and just managing the list becomes more challenging. I mean, people change email addresses, and so I went through a big cleansing of my list, which took me some time on its own. Anyway, these are all like mechanical things, and they're important to do. When you're an author, you're generally doing them yourself, and so you do the full range of things.
And I think I've come to think, and I've actually been giving presentations on this in speaking engagements where authors can really think of themselves as product managers.
Yes.
Speaking with your business hat on, because you are creating a product, you're conceiving it, you're putting together a prototype, which is your first draft, or
yes, totally.
If you outline it, you're looking for feedback and market research from beta readers, from your editors, agents, if you go that route. And then you're packaging it, you're putting the cover together, you're thinking about what the price is, you're figuring out distribution, you're figuring out how to advertise it. I mean, it is like launching and managing a product.
One of the your fellow publications, a website publication, asked me to write an article, which I did. I'll forward it to you, on the differences between being a tech product person and being an author. What is similar and what's different? And exactly what you just described is a big chunk of that little essay I wrote for them, because there are many things that are actually quite the same. And then there's other things that are just completely different. Writing is mostly a solitary exercise. Product work is mostly a group exercise. Oh, that creates a whole different set of dynamics as you go along.
Yeah, there's fewer JIRA tickets in writing.
Yeah.
And the story means something else.
Yeah, exactly. Totally right. So it's it's been a fabulous shift for me, and I do a bunch of other things. I do a lot of board work and a lot of public speaking. So it's this is a chunk of what I do, but it feeds my soul. It's so much fun.
Yeah, sounds like a very full life post Microsoft.
Yeah, and when I watch the craziness in the tech world, I'm quite happy to be where I am.
Yeah, I know. No kidding. I mean, there's a fair amount of craziness happening. A lot of consolidation happening. A lot of layoffs happening. It's not nice out there.
No, it's a tough world. But anyway, it's been a good shift for me, and I'm very excited about how the book's doing, and looking forward to some more MailChimp writing about it coming up in the coming weeks.
Well, I always like to end with a couple of quick, fun questions with my guests, and I'm curious, we're to take a pop culture route. But when you were a kid, Robbie, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV? This is how I'll figure out how old you might be.
Oh yeah, you'll figure out that I'm older than you are. So So I was a giant fan of Gilligan's Island.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I was a big fan of Hogan's Heroes.
It's a wonderful show. I mean, a completely crazy premise.
Oh, of course, both are crazy premises, but both are super enjoyable. I slowly over time I got more involved in this sort of murder mystery thing. So Columbo was high on my list. What was it? The Sunday night mystery movie,
Right.
And they would rotate between Buddy Ebsen and Columbo and a couple of other people. I watched that show. Those were shows I wanted to watch.
I watch Columbo now. I mean, and there's only 69 episodes. I'm sure I've seen all of them. And my wife will, because she likes it too. And I'll be like, let's watch a Columbo. She's like, we've seen all of them. I'm like, yeah, but
it's Columbo. It's Columbo.
Anything with Robert Culp is, worth watching again.
Yeah, exactly. It's super interesting. And so I kind of had the comedy side to me and then the thriller mystery side. And then obviously I love sports. I watched a lot of sports.
Yeah. Who are your teams?
Today, my teams are mostly Seattle teams, so the Mariners and Seahawks. In the time, we live in Wisconsin, so I was a Packers fan and a Brewers fan and a Milwaukee Bucks fan. I used to listen to the Bucks on the radio every night before I went to bed.
Wow. I have a bone to pick with the Mariners. I was in Seattle on business a few years ago, and my hotel was right next to the stadium, which is I love it when stadiums are right downtown. Like,
yeah.
But every time there's a home run, like fireworks are going off from the home team. And I had to wake up early the next morning, and be productive. And the game went late and I'm like, oh, I just want to sleep.
Well, the sports venues give us and they take us away. That's the way it works. That's the way it works.
What about music? What'd you like listening to?
Growing up, and actually to this day, I am a pop music guy. And so I listened to a lot of Ed Sheeran. I listened to a lot of Taylor Swift. I listened to a lot of, growing up, the Eagles, Elton John, John Mellencamp, who momentarily was John Cougar Mellencamp. Sort of what I would call folk pop would be a category for me, or folk country pop, that space in music spectrum. And I listen to music when I write, and that's why in the books each section begins with a series of lyrics from a song.
Very cool.
In this book, there's some Buffalo Springfield in it, which is really old. Shine Down, which is a little bit more modern, and a little John Mellencamp, Jack and Diane. So, there's, I love the way that music kind of sets the tone for what's going to happen in the story.
Yeah. You just have to be careful not to put too much of the lyrics in there, because then you got some rights issues, I think.
Oh, no, trust me. Any lyrics, you have rights issues. I have to go license.
Wow.
Each of those, if you use the lyrics, you license each of the songs.
Okay.
And that world is like in the 18th century in terms of technology. It's unbelievable how painful it is and how hard it is to get it to work, to figure it out. But we managed.
Yeah, very good. And if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice, maybe it's into the 10th grader Robbie Bach. What words of advice would you whisper to your younger self?
I would whisper to myself to take a little time to be more social and experience people more, which sounds strange. I'm a very people-oriented person now, and I grew up in a big company, and so lots of people I managed. My organization had 9,000 people, and so you think, that must have been the way you grew up. I was so laser focused on sports and school all through college that I missed the joy of just getting to know people in a different way. Thankfully, somehow I met my wife in college, because who knows when I would have gotten married. That might have never happened. So I would relax a little bit more. I was a very intense kid growing up, partly because I'm super competitive. So sports was a big form of intensity for me. And I got very serious about school at a very early age. Finding balance is hard.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that most of my life. And so figuring out that balance early on would have been helpful later on, would have avoided some pitfalls for sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, Robbie. The book, of course, is The Blockchain Syndicate. It's available wherever books are sold. Robbie, if people want to reach out to you, do you have a website? Do you have any social media that you're active on?
Yeah, there's. You can certainly go to RobbieBach.com. That's easy. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well, and on Instagram and Facebook. There are websites for both books, Wilkes Insurrection and the Blockchain Syndicate, just as you would expect. And if you go to my website, RobbieBach.com, there's a little button you can say contact me, and that email will show up in my inbox.
There you go, and you might even wind up in a MailChimp list. You never know.
Yeah, be careful. Be careful. Be careful about what you ask for. You'll get more communication from me than you might want.
That's right. That's right. Well, Robbie, this has been fun. Thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Fabulous, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlon uncork a new story.